Само кому се мютнеш.
Не знам как става това.
So, hi everybody. Welcome to PyData Sofia April Meetup. So this is our second online meetup, and this time we decided to host the talks on YouTube. So let's see how it goes. We'll be doing this online. Our meetups will be doing this online for the foreseeable future. So if anyone is interested in speaking in one of our next meetups in the next month, so drop us a message. We'll try to accommodate you. So last time we did our meetup using Cisco WebEx, but this time we decided to see if we kind of can provide better experience using a combination of YouTube streams and Google Meet Room for the discussions afterwards. So we are still figuring out how to what's the best way to host a meetup online. So any suggestions or feedback are more than welcome. Maybe we can do it better next time. So first off, we'll start with the 2 talks, and after each talk there will be a Q&A session. And after the last Q&A session is finished, I'll share a link to Google Meet where everyone can join, and we can continue the discussions further. If you have any questions to the speakers, you can use the chat box in YouTube. It should be placed either on the right of your screen or kind of below the stream. Or if you don't have a YouTube registration, we can use Slido with the event code of 42135. This is shared also in the chat box on YouTube. So you can write your questions at any time, and the speakers will answer them at the end of the talk. Bear in mind that due to how YouTube processes streams, our interactions with the chat will be a bit delayed, probably between 10 and 30 seconds, I hope. And while most of the time you won't notice this, please be mindful if we are sometimes slow to respond to your requests. So for the discussions afterwards, we'll use Google Meet, as I said, and you can ask your questions, you can share any ideas or projects you have, and it's just a regular kind of after meetup discussion sessions that we have when we meet in person. So now, without further ado, for today meetup, we have 2 great speakers. That's Preslav Nakov and Tsvetomila Mikhailova. First, Preslav will talk about fighting CoffID night in disinformation. Probably most of you know Preslav, but he's a principal scientist in QCRI, where he leads the Tembih project. This project aims to limit the effects of fake news, propaganda, and media bias by making users aware of what they are reading. And now I'll hand over to Preslav, where he can start his presentation.
Okay, so I guess I'm unmuted, right? I'm unmuted. You guys can hear me. Yep, okay. So yeah, I actually thought to start without slides, but then I kind of thought that maybe it's good to give you a little bit of background information. So I'll tell you some old things and some newer things, kind of as a background information. So the first thing is, what is fake news, right? So it's a term that I don't really like, but yeah, so normally kind of that would be a quiz, but now it's not really so interactive. But here the question is this fake news? Okay, because I don't really see you, I cannot really ask you to vote or something. I'll save the time and I'll tell you, yes, this is kind of what I would consider fake news. Again, I don't like the term, but yeah, I would consider it fake news because it's something that is false. It's not true. Obama did not order ban on Christmas cards to the military, you know, to respect the Muslims. This is not true. But it's also something that is used as a political weapon. And this is why we worry about fake news. We worry about fake news not that much because they are fake, but because they are used as a political weapon. So something that is just false, but it's not really weaponized, is actually of less interest. And this is something that many people don't understand. Even fact checkers, many fact checking organizations are fact checking claims like, I don't know, this is not a picture of a rabbit of whatever site. I mean, who really cares about it? There are people dying because of spread of disinformation, of fake news, right? I mean, there are much more important things that probably should be fact checked as opposed to, things that are viral in social media, but really are kind of innocent otherwise. And in contrast, if you look at this one, okay, TV fans delighted as Brexit renewed for another season. Okay, is this fake news? Well, that's debatable, right? So this is political satire. It's something funny. It's clearly false, but it doesn't really mean harm. The first one means harm. It means to harm, let's say, the Democrats in the U.S. This one doesn't really mean any harm. It's just it's just something funny. And yeah, whether this is fake news or not, that's debatable. For example, according to the guidelines of some social media like Facebook, this is protected speech. It's something that is kind of fine. So I'm glad that at the European Union, people are more precise in their terminology, and they are never talking about, in the European Commission level, about fake news. They are talking about disinformation, and disinformation is something that is both false and means harm. So something that is just false but doesn't really mean harm, it's misinformation. Something that means harm and it's actually true. For example, I steal your emails and I expose some private information about you. It's actually true, and I do it with for malicious reasons. That would be malinformation, right? And disinformation is something that is both false and means harm, and many people don't get it. And fake news kind of misleads people to think, of this circle and even of this part. So if there's something that you need to remember from this talk, is actually this picture. That this information is something that is both false and that it means harm. And we are working with journalists. We have been working very closely with Al Jazeera. Last year we had a project with Associated Press and RT Ireland. And so on, we are talking to journalists all the time, and they are telling me that the best propaganda is disinformation is when kind of you tell kind of the truth, only the truth, but not the whole truth. So basically, I mean, this is more in this square circle. And this is something that people like 13 Berners-Lee, the creator of the web, realizes, and he was complaining that social media are weaponizing his invention, and this is the core of the thing, that it's used as a political weapon. And the question is, why should we fight the fake news? Okay, I don't like the term, but I'm going to use it because this is what people understand. Well, I mean, primarily it was because of the US elections, a couple of years ago. Yeah, and there have been like also implications that some kind of disinformation in social media has been used to influence also Brexit and other major events. But it's not just about influencing elections. So people get literally killed in India because of disinformation. So somebody says, "Oh yeah, this Muslim guy has, for example, I don't know, let's say beef meat, and beef meat, it's kind of the cow is a sacred animal, and so on. And then there have been incidents there where people go and kill that person, right? And actually, things can get much uglier. So according to an official report by the United Nations, they are blaming an entire genocide against the Rohingya on fake kind of information in social media, okay, on disinformation in social media. And there are other aspects. One aspect is financial. So, for example, this is actually before we started talking about fake news. By the way, the term fake news is not new. It was coined in the 19th century. There are reports about using it and so on. Of course, it meant something different. I'm not going to go there. But okay, so we talk about fake news since the last elections, but in the US and Brexit. But so this is something from 2013, where some Syrian hackers hacked the account of the Associated Press and put their information like 2 explosions in the White House and Barack Obama is injured. And the result was that $136 billion have been erased on the stock exchange. Of course, for a short period of time, and of course it rebounded, but you can see, what actually can happen. Yeah, and more kind of this has been kind of less important. The mainstream, kind of the main line of disinformation, the main target typically has been political, and after that was medical, and after that probably financial. But these days, of course, the medical has become, all these have merged. But let me kind of tell you about the medical, right? So anti-vax movement, UNICEF is blaming 300% spike on global measles outbreak. And actually about a year ago, it's happened that 4 European countries are no more longer measles free. And measles was kind of almost eradicated in the world. So these were Greece, Czech Republic, UK, and probably Albania, I think, those 4. And yeah, so here you can see them: UK, Greece, Czech Republic, and Albania. Okay, I remember correctly. So obviously, things now with the COVID-19, with the coronavirus, have changed. And actually, what is happening now, we see a mixture of all this. So we see a mixture of medical disinformation and of political disinformation, everything, and racism and hate speech, and everything comes together. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this around the end of this presentation. We are going to tell you about a project we are working on right now. Actually, I had to interrupt paper writing to be able to talk to you, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that paper. It's something that I find very fascinating. And about this infodemic is from MIT Technology Review. People are talking about, I mean, we have the pandemic, but we also have the first global infodemic. Okay, and it's something that the World Health Organization also pays attention to. So here are the top 5 focus areas for the World Health Organization. And you see the first one is, okay, capacity to prepare and respond. But the second one is fight the infodemic. This is the second one on the top 5 list of the World Health Organization. So things are very serious. And the thing is that, they're kind of innocent things like, oh, this is the flat Earth society and whatever. People know this very well. I mean, they don't really get food so easily. Some political things, it depends. Sometimes they are food very easily, sometimes kind of harder. But when it comes to coronavirus, it's really a new topic. It's very, very easy to fool them. So these kind of disinformations are really, really effective. Some are ridiculous, like a connection between, let's say, coronavirus and 5G, and saying that, somehow 5G infects people with coronavirus. I don't know how, waves. Anyway, and some are kind of harder to, to debunk. Okay, one question is, can we win the war on fake news? Okay. And so last year, around this time, I was talking in the Interparliamentary Assembly of the United Nations, of the Interparliamentary Union. So there were representatives from, one from France, one from India, and myself. And there were a few hundred members of parliaments of different countries, and they are asking us, what kind of legislation, for 3 hours actually, what kind of legislation can we pass to solve the problem of the fake news? And unfortunately, the answer is not so easy. For this, you need the cooperation of the social media technology companies, but also the governments, international organizations, journalists, academia, and so on. But my favorite way to address the problem is actually education. And again, last year, maybe around this time in May, it was everywhere in the news that Finland is winning the war on fake news. And how are they doing it? Well, they invest in this about five years, maybe by now 6, I guess. After the events in Crimea, they kind of felt threatened of hybrid war and all that. So basically, they started education campaign where they have been teaching their students, but actually it was a campaign at all levels of the society, primarily focusing on students in the school, lower school, high school, but also students in universities and actually any level of society. And by now, there are indications that they're winning the war on fake news. Okay, of course, it comes to a level of media literacy, and if you look on this map, this is again from May last year, you see that Finland is number 1 on media literacy in Europe, and basically Scandinavian countries are doing quite well. So back to the Balkans, kind of things are not so good. So yeah, it's not really clear, right, to what extent this can scale. But to me, this is the most interesting way, and I'll tell you why. So there's nothing new. So let's look at the Second World War. There was a minister of propaganda of Nazi Germany, Joseph Goebbels, who really knew well his job. And he was saying, very simple, propaganda becomes ineffective the moment we are aware of it. Okay? So if you know that you're being manipulated, it's not as effective anymore. Okay? You don't really trust it. So I guess by now, 2 months ago, I was in India as an invited speaker at a conference. Then I visited the tomb of Gandhi, and I found something very curious. See what he was saying about rumors. Don't listen to rumor, but if you do, don't believe it. And this is, the kind of the most important thing. So if you all do that, if you don't believe rumors, if you don't share them, they're not going to become viral, and they're not going to, cause all the damage that they do. So after this prelude, I want to tell you a little bit about the Tambi project. So what we aim to do is you want to limit the impact of fake news, which is basically disinformation, propaganda, media bias, and so on, by making users aware of what they are reading. And I'm going to show you that. And so we are putting this into, you have several unique things, unlike anybody else. We are putting this into a news aggregator that I'm going to show you. We are building media profiles to give you background information. So for example, if you read today an article that says, actually, probably climate change is not, due to human activity, it's actually a natural phenomenon due to, volcanoes or whatever, or natural cycles of Earth. So if I give you background information that this news outlet has been always skeptical about climate change, then you probably take it in one way. If I tell you that actually they have been quite concerned about climate change, but today they publish an article like this, you probably take it in a different way. You want to give this background information. The other thing is fine-grained propaganda analysis. This is super cool. I'm going to show you that. We have comparison to previously fact-checked claims and so on. We have many collaborations. Last year we had a hackathon organized together with the Data Science Society and PyData Pro related to this information. We have a long-term relationship with MIT. We have been working with them for 7-8 years as part of this project in the last 2 years because the project is about 2 years old. We work very closely with Al Jazeera. We have been working with RT and Associated Press. More recently, we work with Facebook and the United Nations. And we have been collaborating with a number of other institutions like Sofia University, Qatar University, and so on. And this project got a lot of media attention. More than 100 media have written about it. Okay, so now is probably the time to stop with this and actually to show you something. Let me show you. So this is Tambi. Tambi is a news aggregator. Think of something like Google News, except that it tells you what you're reading. So let me see if I can demonstrate something. Maybe I can open this some time ago. Okay, it can be an internet connection. I hope it gives you guys hear me well? Anyway, as we're reading, I can actually click on any of those and I can get an idea about this specific news outlet. For example, I can click here and I can learn about, okay, I guess that the network is not, this PBS, this is American Public Broadcast Service, and so on and so forth. So let me kind of show you, you probably never heard of PBS, so let me show you something, I don't know, let me show you BBC, okay? And to get you an idea, give you an idea about what kind of profiles we do. Or if you want, let me show you something closer to home. Let me show you, you can go here and you can, this is wiki.org. I don't know, I can go and I can check Al Jazeera, right? English and Arabic. Okay, so basically you see whether it's central or hyper-partisan, to what extent the content there is propagandistic. So we have analyzed here more than, I don't know, probably about 25,000 articles by Al Jazeera, and we find that 91% are very unlikely to be propaganda and another 5% unlikely. This is actually quite clean. It's, I mean, for some media it's like 95%, 92, but it's kind of extremely clean, kind of non-propagandistic. And then what is the general frame of reporting? Any event, let's say Brexit, or if you want the coronavirus, it has different aspects. Maybe it has a political aspect, maybe it has a legal aspect, maybe it has a health aspect, maybe it has an economic aspect, and so on and so forth. And we are looking into those. And then, do we trust this medium? Kind of to what extent we trust its virtuality of reporting. And for this, we use information from different sources. So, for example, we are looking into what they publish. We are what, for example, Al Jazeera or whatever news outlet we are analyzing publishes, but also how they self-represent, let's say, in their Twitter accounts, what is there in their, let's say, YouTube accounts. So, for example, we analyze their videos that they share in their channels, so that we look into not only what they say, but how they say it. Is there kind of a lot of emotions in the sound, in the way that they speak? We're also looking into traffic information from Alexa Rank, into what is there in their Wikipedia pages, what is there in their kind of how people in Twitter discuss, kind of refer to this media with respect to different topics, and so on and so forth. And we put everything together. Also, what is the bias of the users in Facebook that read this target medium? And we put everything together, and based on this, we come up with this score, actuality score. Okay, each of these things that I'm talking about, this is supervised learning using different models, using certain kinds of neural networks, including transformers. And actually, Tsvetomir is going to talk about transformers after me, so I don't need to cover that. I'm not going to talk about, the technical part in the sense of, what is the actual model behind it. I'm going to show you what it does, right? And then we have the bias based on the same informations. Is it left, center, or right? And you see it's really center, a little bit to the left. You can also see it on a 7-point scale. And then what kind of people read, let's say, Al Jazeera, okay? So in Facebook. And this is something that you can get directly from the advertisement API. So Facebook profiles its users and has a good idea about their political bias. Are they left, right, leaning, kind of, it's more like, are they liberal or conservative? And here you see that there's some liberal bias for Al Jazeera. Okay, so I don't have that for Al Jazeera, but let me show you, I don't know, let's say for BBC. Actually, that's a good exercise because you see it's kind of quite similar, BBC, to the profile of Al Jazeera. It's a little bit, yeah, it's in terms of everything, it's kind of quite comparable. Actually, BBC is even a little bit more to the left than Al Jazeera is, but of course those are estimates. And the audience. So this is something interesting that we can tell you based on analysis of social media, the bias of this news outlet, in this case BBC, with respect to specific topics. And you see that there's a little bit of left bias in different topics. And then we have also kind of bias with respect to, different topics like against Brexit and so on and so forth, which is based on stance detection. And you can go here and you can go and you can search and so on and so forth. Now I can go here. There are different topics that we have analyzed. And one of them, of course, is the coronavirus outbreak. And we have analyzed, we keep constantly analyze, and we have so far analyzed 100,000 articles by 78 media in 17 countries. Actually, we have more media and we have more countries, but this kind of analysis we have not run for everything. And then we show you on the map what is going on, and you can go here and you can monitor what are the most active countries in absolute and in relative terms, and then what are the most propagandistic countries in absolute and in relative terms, and then the same thing for media. What are the most top reporting media in absolute and relative terms, and what are the most propagandistic media in absolute and in relative terms about this topic. And then you can see how much propaganda there is about it. You see it's kind of not that propagandistic. It's about 78% propaganda free. And then you see the perspective from which is being reported. Actually, when we started, you see that it's health and safety, but kind of people recently start worrying about economy and politics. When we started this analysis, it was really about health and safety. And then you can see, who kind of underreports it, who overreports it, and so on. This is one thing that we have about coronavirus. Something more interesting is this PyData system. Okay, I'm going to open it from the beginning. So PyData is a system for propaganda analysis, where I can click here. We have analyzed different topics, and you can see the use of fine-grained propaganda techniques. And actually, let me kind of show you something. Okay. So this is Reuters. Reuters in general is kind of quite clean, but I mean on this topic you see some propaganda techniques. So basically we're looking into 18 propaganda techniques. About half of them are some kind of appeal to emotions, to prejudices, to fear, things like that, and the other half are more like logical fallacies, things that don't make sense logically, things like, I don't know, black and white fallacy, things like you're either with us or against us. Okay, well, there are other options. Or, for example, dictatorship, which is there's no alternative to war. Well, maybe there is, and stuff like that. So, and we are analyzing text and we are showing this to people. And I told you before that my favorite way to fight disinformation is by by educating people. So the idea here is that if you interact with this system for a while, you probably are going to remember, you are going to learn to recognize some of those techniques, and after a while you don't really need the system. So this is something that has happened to me. So I cannot really read the news properly anymore. Each time I read the news, I just like see the propaganda techniques everywhere. Of course, sometimes it's very rarely. Sometimes it's really every kind of every other sentence, and I kind of can get a very good sense about where I'm being manipulated. So here, for example, you see, that the coronavirus outbreak poses a very grave threat to the rest of the world. This appeal to fear. Okay, very grave threat. That's repeated again. Okay, and then you have remains very okay, and so on. So and I don't know, maybe I can open something else. Let me try. Well, okay, so let me, okay, I don't know. Let's look at this India today. Okay. Okay, so have you ever heard of blah, 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 blah. This he is a doubt. Deadly, that's fear. Destroy the global population, that's fear. Right? So it's just me, or did contagion predict the coronavirus? That's a doubt. Yeah. So maybe I can show you something. Okay, so here we have like worded language that's appeal to emotions, pity, ripped her, peeling out. Yeah, flag waving, this kind of more like appeal to patriotism, stuff like that. And in principle, okay, this somehow stopped working, but I can go here and I can show things of different confidences. Now, what is cool is that I can see these techniques and their distribution across those, well, I cannot tell here, but maybe 10,000 articles or whatever, or a few thousand that we have analyzed. You can also kind of search here for by time interval, and you can see you can see things over time, you can see over different media, but the cool thing is that you can see also the distribution. So in general, the most popular propaganda technique is worded language, and then it's appeal to fear and so on. And now if you look at, I don't know, let's pick some left medium in the US, let's say CNN, right? So what you see is some worded language, flag waving, and then it's appeal to fear. Okay. But then if you look into something like a right-leaning one, like Fox News, so what do you guys see? Okay, let's say, okay, see CNN versus the general population. This is the general population. There's a lot of appeal to fear. Okay, not a lot, but if I click on CNN, it's kind of similar appeal to fear. So flag waving is a little bit more, which is kind of being proud of, I don't know, being American or being a particular, I don't know, being a Democrat or stuff like that. But if I look into Fox News, for example, what do you see? So you see that appeal to fear is here, down here. It's number, I don't know, 7. Okay. Right? He's, in general, is number 2, and he's kind of number 7. And what is so kind of, there's really no fear. But what are the techniques that are being used? Well, worded language, it's always the most frequent one, but in slogans, things like "Make America Great Again." I mean, I make it up, right? I mean, but there are different kinds of slogans. Flag waving, that's patriotism. Name calling, spread of doubt, minimization or exaggeration, we have them together, and only then is fear. So kind of see the way that a right-leaning medium covers coronavirus is quite different from the way that a left-leaning medium covers it. So, for example, if you look at Reuters versus the general population, yeah. Okay, and obviously, what you can do is you can see, for example, how right-leaning media cover it, and you see appeal to fear is like down here, or you can see how left-leaning media cover it. Okay, it's also kind of not so. It really depends on the choice that you have here. Now the cool thing is that if you think of in terms of education, if you want to educate users about this, suppose that I'm a left-leaning user, okay, and I don't know, I can open something. Let's say melon wine. Just to kind of show you more examples. It is like pastor says he believes the coronavirus is a plague sent by God to purge a lot of sin. And here you see like immorality, that's worded language. Genuine plague that's coming upon the earth. That's another worded language. It's appeal to kind of emotions, emotional manipulation. God's that angel. Godless communist government, that's another, thing. Get right with God, that's a slogan. All of this is automatic, right? One of the last steps of judgment, okay, that's fear and prejudices, disgusting people, this is name calling, right? And so on and so forth. Demon from hell, that's name calling, and conspiracy theory, and so on. This kind of causal oversimplification that you kind of explain everything with conspiracy theory. Actually, this kind of works quite well. And it's kind of bird-based, transformer-based sequence model, something that I guess Tsutomu is going to talk about in terms of model. But okay, so what I wanted to tell you is that suppose that you are a left-leaning user, okay? And I can actually go and I can show you how bad the right-leaning media are, okay? Because if I show you how bad the left-leaning media are and you are a left user, you are not going kind of to like it. Because people don't like to be told that they're wrong or that things that they like are somehow biased or propagandistic or something like that. But if I show you how the things that you don't like are somehow propagandistic or using those manipulation techniques, you are probably going to say, yes, I knew it, right? The other way around, if I have like if you are a right-leaning user and you don't like left media, I can show you how bad left media are. And I can easily switch here between left and right. Then basically, but the point is that if you interact a little bit with the system, you can enjoy how bad the media you don't like are, but the hope is that in the process, you're going to understand how you're being manipulated. And next time you read any medium, doesn't matter whether it's the one that you like or not, you're probably going to see how you're being manipulated. And you're going to understand what is kind of media of better quality and of worse quality. Now, when we're talking about propaganda, I mean, I did not talk to you about the definition of propaganda, but definition of propaganda is such that just like if you remember, disinformation had two components. So it was something that was both false and meant harm. Okay, so let me show you. You remember this picture. Disinformation is something that is both false and means harm. In a similar way, this propaganda is something that wants to convince you of something, and it does it on purpose. So there are like two components. One is that it tries to convince you of something, and the second is the intent. Here we cannot really prove intent. We have been talking about those propaganda techniques to a leading world fact-checking organization, and we are telling them we are detecting propaganda, and they heard and they said, okay, propaganda, good for proving intent. And of course, they were very right about it, because you cannot really prove intent. So the fact that you see, I don't know, even in Reuters, which is quite, it's as clean and as high quality as it gets. By the way, here we have 1,300, and we have ordered them by propagandistic content. The ones on the top have some propaganda. So, for example, here we have like, this is threatens public events and damages output and tourism and so on. Of course, if you go somewhere down there, you're probably going to see something that's much more clean. But the fact that you use propaganda techniques, I mean, okay, the thing that I wanted to point out is that propaganda, by definition, is not good, it's not bad. It's not part of the definition. Also, it's not true, it's not false. It's more about persuasion techniques, and you can use them for good purposes. So, for example, I can use propaganda to convince you to vaccinate your children, or to do something about the climate change. Is what Greta Thunberg has been doing out of good intentions. So you don't necessarily need to mean harm. And then whether it's true or false is also orthogonal. It doesn't matter. Propaganda is kind of more like how I convince you of something. Of course, if I'm a bad actor, I have to use propaganda techniques to perform disinformation. But the fact that you use propaganda techniques doesn't necessarily mean that you're involved in something bad. Just like if you have certain symptoms of certain disease, doesn't mean that you have the disease. The disease causes the symptoms, and there can be many different diseases that are causing those symptoms. For example, high fever. It's not necessarily COVID-19. And here's the same thing. The fact that you see many propaganda techniques doesn't really mean that somebody's doing something bad. But still, I mean, if you see many of them in some particular article, then you can kind of ask the question why this is, right? And okay, so something else that I wanted to tell you, if I go to the main page of Purta, is I can go and I can, I don't know, I can go to any, anyway, you can go and you can get any article from anywhere, and I can just click here, get this, and actually I can submit an article here. I can get its text, and here's the text. And actually this text I can, if I want, I can go and I can edit it. Okay, sorry. Actually, I think this is kind of quite long text. It might take a little bit of time to analyze. So in the meantime, what I can tell you is something else. Let's say, I don't know, same CNN, for example. I will have a browser plugin with those things. So I can click here. Oops. And it tells me that it's kind of factual. And I can click here and I can get to the media profile about CNN. And see that it's kind of quite factual, probably a little bit left-leaning. Okay, actually, quite left-leaning. Okay, and another thing that we have is we have APIs, something that developers can use for general propaganda detection at the article level, or for propaganda detection at this fine-grained propaganda detection that I have been showing you, actually this one. And for article level bias, so if I show an article, it's going to tell me whether it's left, center, right leaning. Check worthiness is going to tell me for each word where it's word fact checking, and then this comparison to fact checking, which is comparison to previously fact checked claims. And actually here the analysis is back of this article, and we have headline, graphic, aim, that's worded, language, emotional, ravaged by the disease. This is kind of again, emotional manipulation, and so on and so forth. Was that twice? He was asked, right? That's casting doubt. So kind of you see, here and there, epidemiological modelers. That's kind of name calling and so on and so forth. So you can go and you can play with that. You're welcome. And the last thing that I wanted to show you is we are now working on another project, which is about, so basically like I've shown you three things. Let me kind of try to summarize two things so far. One is the general, actually three things. The one is the general news aggregator, where of course these days all the news are somehow about the coronavirus. The other thing was these media profiles. I can click anywhere and get the media profile. The other thing was this topic page about the coronavirus, and basically you can go here and you can try other things like Brexit, for example, and so on. And the third thing was this fine-grained propaganda analysis, where you can submit your own text or do some kind of thing. And of course, we have APIs, we have browser plugin, you can try all of these things. But something new that we're working now on is, and again, as I said, I had to interrupt writing this paper that we just submitted to archive, about fighting the COVID-19 infodemic. So we are analyzing this time tweets, and we are doing this from the perspective simultaneously of journalists, fact checkers, social media platforms, policymakers, governments, and the society. And it's not just about whether it's true or false. It's actually much more than that. And I can probably kind of some tweets can illustrate that. Okay, so obviously there are jokes like this one. My mom has a PhD on coronavirus from WhatsApp University. Okay, that's kind of innocent. I mean, there are rumors. This is something about factuality, right? Coronavirus is a scam, and virus is bigger scam. Death certificates are fake. It's a plot, and so on. Okay, watch this video. We do this in English and in Arabic. We are collecting data for that. We have a very detailed guidelines of 10 pages, which is all in this paper. And he's like, oh, there are those military helicopters that are spreading, I don't know, pesticides again, the coronavirus, I mean, and this kind of in English, in Arabic. Then there are conspiracy theories. Okay, there's a plan. You put 5G and then you have that virus so that nobody sees, and then, I don't know, and then you put the vaccines of Bill Gates and everybody dies, something like that. I mean, they're kind of, conspiracy theories like that. And then there are other things like promoting bad cure. Okay, bad. It's more like unproven. It's like boil garlic water. I don't think that's so bad. It's kind of innocent. It's better than drinking bleach or something like that. They are kind of more crazy things, or drinking methanol, which are really bad. But garlic is a good vegetable, but doesn't really cure the disease. And there are other things like xenophobic, racist prejudices, like things like, okay, don't eat Chinese food, don't eat Italian food, and stuff like that. So you see that it's not, when it comes to the COVID-19, it's not just that much just about virtuality or not. It's also other things. And then, so here you have other things. So other things are like spreading panic, or there are many people buying guns because they're afraid of that the public order is going to be disrupted, or there's blaming the authorities, or the government didn't do enough, or whatever. Or they can be actually positive things about citing in social media measures that other governments have taken to fight the pandemic. So, for example, this is what Germany does, and this is something that might be useful for policymakers in other countries to say, okay, here's what they are doing. They are doing that number of tests, and they have that many ventilators and stuff like that. And they are putting people in quarantine, blah blah. And then you have other things like call for action. So, for example, okay, you need to do something about those workers that are actually producing our food, because otherwise we run out of food. And this is not that much about spreading panic. It's more like urging some certain action to be taken. So basically, what we have done, and again, you can go and find the paper in archive. We are taking a unique perspective of multiple stakeholders, as I said, of journalists, but also fact checkers, social media platforms that might want to stop something, policymakers, governments, and the society, as interests of the society as a whole. And so we have very detailed guidelines, and we have like questions like, okay, is there a factual claim or not in the first place? Is the first question that we are asking and we are annotating. The second one is, okay, does the tweet appear to contain false information? Is it of interest to the general public? Then I'd like to find it here. Okay, yeah. The other thing is, is it harmful? I mean, to a person, to the society, to a company, to a product, and things like that. All these are related somehow to factuality and are more like to help journalists and fact checkers. So do you think that based on the previous questions, this claim should be fact checked? The others are more interesting. The other things is like harm to society. Okay, oh, it's not harmful. Oh, it's a joke. Oh, it spreads panic. Oh, it's xenophobic or racist. Don't buy cucumbers from Iran, or don't eat Italian pasta, or stuff like that. It promotes bad cure, like drink bleach, or a rumor or a conspiracy. We have seen some examples of this. And then things when it requires attention, like, do you think that some government entity or policymaker should pay attention to this tweet? And this can be for different reasons. It can be for the reasons of the previous question, that it actually spreads panic or rumors or something. It can be because it blames authorities. It can contain some interesting advice or calls for action, or discusses action taken in other countries, for example, or discusses possible cure, and maybe governments want to pay attention to that, or maybe asks a question. And we have collected this in English and in Arabic. Something interesting that we do is we are also looking into not just the text of the tweet, as most people do, but we are kind of opening and we're looking into this that actually people see. So kind of we get an idea who is the person, and also kind of replies and all this information when they're doing the annotation for some of the questions. And we have some statistics about the English, the Arabic data, where it comes from, distribution over different questions and the different answers for English and for Arabic. And then the relationship between verified and unverified accounts, and how this impacts the different labels. And then the correlation between different questions, question 2 versus question 3, and so on and so forth. And this for English and for Arabic. It's actually, I think, it's something that I find quite interesting. So we have annotated so about 400 examples in English and about 200, 250 in Arabic, because it's super painful and super slow to do. We are planning to hire professional annotators to do this kind of annotation, to have like, I don't know, maybe 10,000, maybe more, so that reliable systems can be used. And this is something that I'm very excited about, because it combines many, many different perspectives. And yeah, that was what I have promised to present, and I stop here.
Okay, thank you for your talk. There are a few questions. So the first one, I believe it refers to the audience measures in Tambik. So it's are these estimations based on a sample which is used to infer on a population, or you have the numbers of the entire population? I'm not super sure what it refers to.
Okay, so I mean, I mean, I have talked about many things. Do you think this is about the tweets, or this is about something else?
I think it's about the information, the audience information from Facebook.
Okay, so okay, so okay, I
It's on
got it.
the news source level.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I get it. So let me kind of go quickly in presenter mode, so
Yeah.
that yeah, so that I can give context to this. I see what this is about. Okay, so if I go here, come on. Okay, yeah, if I click on something, yeah, I don't know. Let me show you. I don't know. Let's say Fox News, right? So you can see their audience reach. It's kind of, you see quite conservative users. So those estimations, it's a very good question. Those estimations are based on the US users only. And that is a limitation. So, and this is actually what Facebook gives to their advertisers, which basically means that I can target people that read Fox News but are liberal, for example. I can advertise them something like that, or I can say I want those that watch or read Fox News but are kind of moderate, or are very conservative, or something like that. And because they have to expose to their advertisers how many, to the people that are going to buy advertisements to show to users, they are trying to give them an idea about how big the population. If you kind of become too restrictive, maybe kind of you have a super small target group, and they might want to warn you, okay, maybe there are not that many people that match all your criteria, maybe you want to relax it a little bit. So kind of they give you these estimations, and this is something that they have to expose to the people that are buying ads. And actually, if you know how to do it, I mean, anybody can go there and play a little bit and get those numbers, basically manually, or automatically, semi-automatically. But those are numbers only for users in the US. Okay. Other
Okay.
questions?
The next question is, are the Guardian still free of propaganda?
So, I mean, okay, we can go there. Let me. Okay, I don't want to be personal about any medium. Okay, let me see how I share a screen. First of all, those are automatic models, right? That have certain error. So, I mean, you can go there and you can see. And I'll tell you what we do. Okay. I'll go here. Actually, okay, Guardian is not among the top ones, but I can search for it here. It's the Guardian. Okay, there are two ways to answer the question. One is more like at the general level, right? How, I mean, you see that, okay, it's this kind of a bit more propaganda compared to others, but still 70% is very unlikely to be propaganda, and another 13% is unlikely, and so on. So it's kind of reasonably good. And then with respect to the coronavirus thing, I mean, we have here Guardian, we have 345 articles, and we have basically sorted them by propaganda. So if I go, I don't know, somewhere around the end, click on this article, that's probably not going to be super propagandistic. See, we don't find anything. See, there's so much text, right? And we find here dangerous. Okay, that's worried language, emotional manipulation. Worried should we be? This kind of doubt, and that's it, right? Of course, if you go there for any medium, we have seen even for Reuters. If you go on the, I mean, if I click on the top one, this kind of the most propagandistic one, right? There's a lot of appeal to fear and so on and so forth. But something that I want to warn you is that all these newspapers, they have news reporting and they have also editorials, okay? And the editorials, they are supposed to be provocative, okay? And I guess that what we have here, kind of around the top, those are mostly editorials. But yeah, they're kind of supposed to be more rhetoric and so on and so forth. So I don't want to say, but let me tell you how we learn all these things. The truth has to come from somewhere. So we are trusting media bias fact check, which is the best something that has over 3,000 media that have been manually analyzed and for their factuality and bias. And there are journalists there with very clear methodology and so on. So here you see it's kind of mostly factual, okay? For Guardian, in kind of center-left bias, which is kind of not extremely biased, and of kind of mostly factual. So I mean, it's in green, so it's not very high factual or something, but it's on the factual side. So Guardian is considered by those fact checkers of reasonably good quality, and we analyze them in a similar way. That's what I can say. And in terms of factuality, yeah, I mean, okay, I stop here.
Can you recommend any educational books about propaganda techniques?
Educational books about propaganda techniques. So there has been sort of the okay. Let me share a screen a bit.
Yeah, and while we are at the last question is, can we have the link of the paper you shared?
Yes. Okay, I'll do that. But let me give you. So if you go to Purta, okay. So this is Purta. And you might, if you want, you can read those two papers. So one is about these fine-grained propaganda analysis techniques, and this paper describing the system that I have shown you, and this is a paper describing actually the way that the system works, right? Kind of the underlying, I mean, the propaganda techniques that are here, together with some brief definition, some distribution of the data, how the notation was done, how the evaluation was done, and things like that, and then the different models, neural networks that have been used with some kind of birth transformer with some gates on top of it and multitask learning and stuff like that. I don't want to go into details right now. You can do that. Another thing that you can do is you can go into this website for propaganda. And I mean, we have a website for the propaganda sub-analysis project, and so what I mean, we are also kind of organizing different events like a shared task at Senegal, which also has a leaderboard and so on and so forth, some workshops. But over here, so you can go here, you can see the propaganda techniques that we're using. the 18 propaganda techniques together with specific um, examples for each of them. Another thing is for those techniques, if you go here, we have the scheme about how to annotate them. So basically, if you want to check, kind of you start here and you ask, does it expose a rational argument? If yes, that's a logical fallacy. If no, then it's emotional manipulation. This is what I told you, that about half of them are logical fallacies and half are some kind of emotional and sentiment manipulation. Then you kind of ask another question, and eventually you end up in something. Okay, oh, it's name calling. Technically here, it is going to get me into name calling. So you can kind of learn more about the techniques. But another place to learn about the techniques is you can go to this propaganda and you can look into our publications. And in those papers that we have, you can actually find out. I mean, we have a good review of the literature about that. Actually, we have also a long journal paper on this, which is like 40 pages, and it has like a good literature overview. You can go and you can look there. Another thing that we have is when we have not put yet the thing online, but we have an HK paper, a survey on computational propaganda detection. And here the view is both from a text and from a social network perspective, while the other thing that I have been talking about here, it's only from the text perspective. And this is kind of propaganda at the entire document level. So this is at the entire document level, this one as well, and it's kind of the fine-grained propaganda. And for the fine-grained propaganda here is basically the same paper, and he's about the system. And there's more coming.
Okay. So let me just quickly do some housekeeping. The next talk will start in 5 minutes. So this is 20 past 8 for the time zone in Sofia. This is I think 20 past 6 in the UK. So if someone wants to take a coffee break, now's the time. For the rest of the people who don't want to, there are a few more questions regarding the Preslav talk. One is, have you thought that everything we've been told on briefings about COVID-19 is mostly disinformation?
Can you repeat the question?
Have you thought that everything we've been told on briefings about COVID-19 is mostly disinformation?
I don't think so. I don't think so. So they're different. Okay, I guess it depends on which country. So, but no, I think that in most countries the people that are responsible for this. I mean, most countries are taking it seriously. Even some have been taking it lightly, but eventually started taking it seriously, and they have competent people with medical background and so on that are running the show. And um, so there are sometimes strange advice coming, sometimes but kind of then there are corrections, okay, or that was a joke or something. And then there are other cases where um, this kind of new treatment or new drug or something, and there are many cases where really even the medical people don't really know whether this specific drug is going to work or not, right? And there can be early indications that it might work, and later the studies can come and say it's kind of more likely that it doesn't, or the other way around. So yeah, I see. I I think that kind of what you see in briefings is kind of mostly good stuff. Of course, one nice exercise that you can do, you can take the text of one of those briefings and turn it to our PERTA system for propaganda analysis, and you can go and you can find the propaganda techniques, and you can see if there's some, scary tactics, trying to scare people, or which can be actually for good intentions. I mean, you should stay home, otherwise, this is going to happen to you. Or where is some kind of emotional manipulation or exaggeration, minimization. Those are things that you can actually go and try with PERTA.
Okay, and the last question we have is: do Facebook share the political leanings of their users in its API, or you have modeled that using their statuses and profiles?
Facebook does not share information about users. So Facebook, and I mean, okay. So what they do internally, I don't know. Okay, so what I can tell you is that what they do is they are exposing in the advertisement API information. I mean, if I want to buy advertisement, I want to say, okay, I want to sell to people in this town that are that age and maybe they're male or female, because I'm going to sell them, this kind of products or those kind of products, and this kind of something legitimate. They also have, among the many things that you can ask for, you can kind of ask for, I want to advertise to people of certain income, and this kind of, again, Facebook has some estimation of that. And among the many things, they have also whether they have interacted with specific news outlet, like, I don't know, Fox News or CNN or Guardian or whatever. And they're also going to tell you, whether those people have specific leaning, kind of conservative or liberal, but they don't tell you anything about specific people. You just say, I want somebody from this city that is male and that reads this newspaper and is conservative, and then they tell you there are 15,000 people like that, but they don't really give you information on any specific person.
Okay, well, thank you, Prastav, for your great talk. It's very interesting. So we'll start with Tsetumiro's talk in 1 minute. But in the discussions afterwards, if any of you have any questions, you can ask Prastav and Tsetumilo about them. So, Tsetumilo, if you can share your screen now. So in the meantime, I'll introduce her. So Tsetumila is a PhD student in IST in Lisbon. I can't pronounce it this in Portuguese, but maybe she will. And she's working on structured prediction in NLP. And her current research is on models with Latin structures. Before starting her PhD, she had a lot of experience as a software engineer.
Okay, should I start? Do you see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen, and yes, you can start.
Thank you. So today I will talk about sparse transformers. This is out of my research group. So we are a small but very cool research group in Nicasoz, in Lisbon, Portugal. PhD student there. Okay, so first we're going to start.
Sorry, Tsetumilo, you're breaking up. Maybe you should stop your camera for the time being. Okay. It seems that we're experiencing some difficulties. We'll be back shortly. Okay, so let's take 5 more minutes break. Or actually, let's start at past. We'll try to resolve the technical issues we are experiencing now. Okay, so Tsvutomilo is coming back very soon, so we should continue in a minute or so. Hi again.
Hi, can you hear me now? I'm very sorry. I don't know what happened. I just got kicked
Yes,
out of the.
we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So where did I?
I'd suggest you start from the beginning. It got somewhere when you said the name of your university.
Oh, really?
So
Oh, okay. Okay, very sorry about that. Let me start presenting. Okay, do you
yes,
see?
all good now. Yes.
Okay. So, well, today I'm going to talk about sparse transformers again. Okay, so let's get to the point. First, we are going to discuss what is sparsity and why we want to talk about it. Then we are going to talk about transformers, and then we will see how this sparsity is implemented in our models. So what's sparsity and why we care about it? It basically means having lots of zeros. So imagine a vector that has lots of elements, and if we call the vector sparse if it has only some elements that are not zeros, and it has lots of elements that are zeros. Why we care about this in the current context is because of the fact that probably many of you are familiar with the softmax function. We use it a lot of in our models, for example, in the attention or in the output layer of the model, if we do some classification, for example. And the problem with softmax is that it outputs a dense vector. Dense vector means that all the elements of the vector are non-zeros. And what we want to achieve with sparsity is that we want to focus only on some important stuff, not to give probability mass to all the elements of the vector. So yeah, and that's why we want sparsity. We have only the important parts that the model considers important to be non-zeros. To give you even to convince you in that, I'm going to show some examples. For example, if we have a model that processes some text, we might want to focus only on specific words in a sentence. So here's an example from the attention of. So here, each row in these matrices is the attention. So it's the probability that these words looks at other words of the sentence. And we can see here the first matrix is generated with softmax. So what happens is that the model puts some probability mass to the entire sentence. And what we want to achieve with using sparsity is that we want our model to learn something important and to only focus on some specific words when it generates some word, for example. And it's even more interesting when we give an example with an image. So here what we see is the task of an example for the task of image captioning. This task is the following. So we put an image, we give an image to our model, and we want the model to produce a caption for this image. And this is a short sentence that describes the image. Here in the first line, we see that we are shown the attention that the model is putting on the image for generating the underlined words. So the first line shows attention with softmax. And here we see that it's very blurry because it gives some probability to the whole image. And if we have sparsity, we can achieve a little more focused view of only some important parts of the image. And here, depending on the function that we used, the model can really learn to focus on important parts. So I hope that I already convinced you that sparsity is cool. And we are going to use sparsity as a means to having more interpretable models. The next thing that I want to talk about is the transformer model. I'm going to make a very quick introduction for those of you who never heard of it or only heard of it. And if you're very familiar with the transformer, don't worry, because it will just take a couple of slides only to introduce the important things about the transformer in order to understand the idea of this work. So the transformer model was introduced 2-3 years ago with a paper called Attention is All You Need. So basically, this is a sequence-to-sequence model, meaning that we give to the model some input that's a sequence, and the model outputs another sequence. The transformer model is based on attention. We are going to see what this is in a while. And it's interesting because it's different models or different extensions to this model achieve state-of-the-art on many NLP tasks. And it's so if you're working on NLP, the chance that you use transformers is high. So let's quickly go through the idea of the transformer. For this, I'm going to use a very cool blog called the blog post called the Illustrated Transformer. Probably if you work with transformer, you have seen this one. If you haven't, I highly recommend it because it's explaining the model in a very intuitive and graphical way. So I'm going to borrow a picture from there to explain the model. So as we said, the transformer is a sequence-to-sequence model. The input is some sequence of text. In this case, this is some sentence in French. And the output is another sequence of text. In this case, a sentence in English. So this model here does translation from French to English. But there could be different tasks, different kind of sequences. So if we zoom inside the model, we'll see that it has encoders and decoders. The idea of the decoder, of the encoder, is to take the input and to output some representation of this input that will later be used by the decoder. Decoder, on its part, takes into account this representation here of the input text, and is responsible for generating the output sequence. If we zoom in even more, we can see that the encoder and the decoder of transformers are consist of several layers. The number of these layers is just a parameter of the model, so we can control how many layers we want there to be. And those layers have the same structure. And the output of the last encoder layer is used by each layer in the decoder in order to generate the output sequence. If we take a look inside each of these layers, they basically have some attention and then followed by feed-forward layer. So let's see this with an example. Here, we want to encode the sentence thinking machines. This is a sequence of 2 elements. And here we pass to the first encoder layer, the embeddings of these words. Then they go into the self-attention, they output some vectors, then they go through some feed-forward layer, and then they are output from the first encoder layer, and all the encoder layers have a similar structure. So the part that we care about in our presentation is this attention layer. So attention means that we allow each word in the sequence to attend to other words in the case of self-attention in the same sequence. So this means how much we want to focus on all the different words in the sequence when we do the representation of this word, for example. And here, this formula, how the attention is calculated, we're not going to go into the details of it. What we care about is that it uses softmax. This means that we do something. So we have some input, we do some transformation of the word embeddings, for example. We get some scores for each word, and then we do softmax. This means that we have some probability that defines how much these words, with what probability it looks at specific parts of the sentence. And self-attention means that the words in this sequence attend to the words in the same sequence. Another interesting thing is that self-attention can have many heads. This means it can have several vectors of probability that are mapped to this sequence, and it can have even more heads. So some standard number is 8 heads, but this is also a parameter that we can set up. And what's interesting, what turns out to be interesting, is that the attention heads can focus on different things of the sentence. We'll talk about this a little later. Also, something that we have to know about transformers is that it has attention in 3 places in the model. This is self-attention in the encoder, meaning that when we make representations of the words in the output sequence, in the input sequence, we look at the words in the same sequence. We also have self-attention in the decoder, meaning that when we make a representation of one word of the output sequence, we attend to the same sequence. And the third attention, the third place where we have attention is this contextual attention, where the words in the output sequence attend to words in the input sequence. For the scope of the current presentation, what we want to focus on, that in the transformers, sparsity is introduced in those attention head. Attention head is, we can think of it as one vector over the entire sequence. Okay, the idea of this is that if we focus on just a few words, this can make the model easier to interpret. And several groups have thought about this idea of having sparsity in transformers. So there are several implementations of this idea. For example, some people from OpenAI are doing this sparse transformer with a fixed attention span. So it only focuses on several words around the current word that attends on them. Some work from Facebook research that trains how long the span will be. And there's a work which comes from our group that is for adaptively sparse transformers. And here we can the attention in such a way that the word can focus on words in the sentence, but they can be in different places in the sentence, which is cool. And we are going to further idea now. So this work on adaptively sparse transformers is based on two key ideas. The first key idea is that we replace the softmax in the attention heads by some other normalizing function. This means that the output will be sparse and will give some probability. The second key idea is that this normalizing function will be adaptively sparse. This means that it will learn how sparse it wants to be, because it might not want to be sparse, as we'll see. In order to give some intuition of how this is implemented, I will start with talking about softmax. So probably most of you have heard about softmax and have used it. So what it does when we use it is that softmax exponentiates and normalizes, meaning that if we have a vector of scores z, the softmax of the ith element will be the exponent of the score of this element divided by the normalizing constant. So this will give some probability of the ith word. What we don't like about it is that it's fully dense, so it's always greater than zeros. And so another thing that we want to mention is argmax. Argmax can be written as the solution of this optimization problem, finding the maximum element of Z transpose P, where Z is the vector of scores and P is the probability distribution over those scores that we want to calculate. So P is the solution of this is what we want to find. And this argmax is one hot vector that has zeros everywhere and one in the position of the highest scored index. And here, it turns out that there's a very nice formulation of regularized argmax, where if we have a convex function omega, we can define this omega regularized transformation. So the argmax omega of z, this is the function that we obtain when we use this function here. So what we want to do here, the idea is that we want to find out some suitable functions such that the minimization, the solution of this optimization problem will give us the vector with probabilities. And as we saw in the previous slide, when we have this function equal to 0, we have argmax. And what is interesting is that if we here you use Shannon entropy as a regularizer, we recover softmax. So there's another interesting function that gives us sparse max, which is a sparse version of softmax. So it gives probabilities, but the vector is sparse. And the interesting thing that the adaptively sparse transformers are based on is that this thing can be even further generalized. And we are using for the adaptive sparse transformers is a generalization of this regularization of argmax, and this is called alpha and max. It is parameterized, so this function here is parameterized by this parameter alpha and is given in this form. What is interesting about it is that if we control alpha, we can define how sparse our output can be. If when alpha goes to infinity, closer and closer to argmax. So here, if alpha is infinity, this will become 0, so we recover the argmax. If we have alpha equals 1, we recover softmax, so it's still not sparse. But for alpha greater than 1, this function becomes sparse. So the key idea here is that in our model, we can have such a function in our attention heads, for example, where we can learn this parameter alpha, so the model can be adaptively sparse. And here is just a graphical idea of how this thing looks. So for alpha equals 1, we have the softmax, which is some, I guess you're familiar with this one. So the interesting thing is that when we start to increase alpha, the function starts to become more and more sparse, meaning it has more and more zeros. And here the intuition is that when we alpha goes to infinity, this will recover the argmax function. So the main thing that we want to take out of this part is that the adaptively sparse transformers replace this softmax in the attention heads with the alpha and max that we just defined, where alpha is a learnable parameter of the model. And this allows the model to learn how sparse each of its heads should be. And the idea of why we're doing this is, as I mentioned in the beginning, is for having more interpretable models and hopefully better performing models. And one example here is for that it can be shown that some of the by using sparsity, we can more easily identify in different head specializations. For example, one head here, this is just an output of one of the attention heads from the transformer model, is a head that learns to point to the previous position. So when we generate a word, it puts most of its attention mass on the previous position. So in the case of softmax, we see that this is also true, but it's a little more blurred because we have probability mass over the whole sequence. And when we have sparse attention, we can see that this is more and more clearly visible. Another interesting attention heads. Okay, by the way, here the alpha was learned by the model in this 1.91, so it decided to make the model pretty sparse. Another head that was detected is the interrogation detected head. What it does is that it assigns high probability to question marks at the end of the sentence for those words that that are related to the question. For example, here in this sentence, what puts most of its probability to the question mark. Another interesting thing about this specific head here is that it decided to learn alpha very close to 1. So the alpha and max decided to make the head not sparse, which is interesting. And it's the idea of the adaptively sparse. Another interesting head that was detected during those experiments was the BP merging head that places most of its probability mass in the same BP cluster as the current token. So BP, this is, for those of you who never heard of it, this means byte pair encoding. And basically the idea is that we split the words. Instead of the whole words when we train the model, we split the words on criteria. So for example, here the word balloons was split into those 3 tokens. And these were the tokens that were part of the vocabulary. So, and it's interesting that this head, completely unsupervised, decided to learn that when we generated this token, it will attend to the next tokens that are part of the same word. And again, this head decided to be very sparse. So these are just examples from some experiments on machine translation. And of course, this is still an open field of research, so many more interesting examples can appear. So at this point, if I have shown you that sparsity can be useful inside the models, and you might be wondering how you can use this. Is it this easy to use? Is it something that you have to put a lot of work in. Well, it's a very cool Python package that implements this sparse model. So if you want to do this, just you can just do pip install and max, and you can get this module and start playing it. Or you can also check its GitHub repository. So basically, this is a model that is using PyTorch. So that's one thing about it. So it uses PyTorch and it implements some of these algorithms for alpha and max. If you are interested, you can just take a look at it. And the usage is simply when you install the model, you can just replace the use of softmax with sparse max, which is a specific some specific implementation of fentmax, or some of the other functions that are present in the model. And another thing, if you want your model to have sparse output, you can replace the softmax in the output layer with some of these endmax functions. And then the other thing that is important to do is use the corresponding loss function instead of cross entropy or okay, so if you're interested in it, you can check there are lots of links here to the documentation, to the papers, into the GitHub repo. Okay, so this was everything from me. So today we covered three main things. So we talked about what is sparsity and why it's interesting to think about it, to include it in the models for better interpretability. We showed how we can include sparsity in transformers, and in hope that it will make the models more interpretable. And we also saw the intuition of what stands behind the sparsity in the adaptively sparse transformer. So this is the use of the endmax function, and also, yeah, at the end we show that if you want to use it, and if you're using PyTorch, you can use sparsity out of the box with this PyTorch plugin. Okay, so I think that's all from me. Thanks for the attention, and I'm waiting for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your interesting talk. Everyone to ask their questions in the chat or in the slide. In the meantime, I have a few questions. So first, do you think this sparsity in the attention heads changes the training and inference time significantly, or it's kind of the end layer, it's not that significant?
Do you mean in terms of running time or something else?
In training time and during inference.
Okay, yeah, it depends on the implementation. For example, I know that sparse max, for example, is a little slower than softmax, and here, especially in this module, so there are some implementations of, for example, this endmax 1.5 and the sparse max are a little faster, but if you use the for example, the generic attention, it can be a little slower. So it really depends on how it's implemented. Because the tricky part is the derivative of this thing, because you need, when you train the model, you need that. So yeah, it can be a little slower than using softmax.
Okay. Then I'm not super familiar in that field, but I've heard some critiques of using attention as a proxy for interpretability. The problem, or it still has the same problem?
What do you mean, the same problem? Well,
yeah, some people argue that you can't just use attention and claim that this is interpretable in terms of what the model understands.
Well, the interpretability and explainability and all these things are still a very open field of research, and people are still trying to define what they mean. So I'm sure that you cannot say, okay, this solves the problem completely, but this is just a step towards solving it. So yeah, it's still work in progress.
Okay. The next question is there something special about the backpropagation algorithm using this losses in this sparse?
Yes, there's a lot of special things. So because these are different functions and they depend on the choice of this omega function, it can be specific for some cases, for example, for sparse max, and then you can derive a specific algorithm for it. But yeah, it's a little tricky to implement that, and I wouldn't do it myself. But if you want to use it, I recommend you to use some library that's already implementing this. So it's not trivial for everyone to implement it themselves. So in this library, the backprop is implemented.
Okay. Have you done any benchmarks on your model versus the default mention?
You mean what kind of benchmarks?
I believe the question asks in terms of performance.
So in the performance on the task, or okay, I'll tell both. In time, I said, as I mentioned, this is currently the implementation of this is slower than softmax, and in terms of results on the downstream tasks, they are comparable, or sometimes the sparse attention. I don't know if I'm still sharing the screen. Am I?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so here, this is the result from the paper that uses this. And currently, these are experiments on machine translation that give a little higher scores with using sparsity. But I want to mention here that this is just a few experiments, and for a concrete task, they can look very different. So what it shows here, that it gets a little improvement, and it gives the plus of a little better interpretability, but this is with expense of some running time.
Okay. The next question is, what happens with sparsity as we go deeper? And as a clarification, we might be looking at 2 or 3 words in layer 2, but 1 or 2 different words in layer 3.
So you mean if the heads become sparser as we go deeper? Okay, this, I think it was mentioned somewhere here. I think the observation was that with the layers become more, so the model becomes, so the attention becomes sparser as we go, but I have to check this. So this is still something that is work in progress. It might depend on the task and so on, so it really depends. But yeah, there's
okay. There's another clarification on this question. Maybe this will narrow things a bit. Does the model pay attention to the same words as we go deeper?
Okay, this is something that is also depends on the task and whether, let me see if there is something interesting. Okay, yeah, here is a model. Okay, so here is a graph that shows how the attention changes for fixed. Okay, this is divergence in heads. So how much they disagree as we go layers, and it seems that they start to. Let me see if there's interesting. Okay, so this thing here, but for the different layers, the values of the alpha, so the sparsity changes, and so if one is more sparse and the other not, so it will look at more or less words in the sentence. But still, I guess this depends on the task, because here it's for machine translation. If it's something else, for example, summarization or another task, I'm not sure that we'll see the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, if the person who asked this can, we can continue this in the discussion phase. And one last question before we go into the kind of discussion part of the meetup is: have you tried to use the attention to translate from one form of literature to another, let's say from fantasy to sci-fi?
I haven't, for sure.
Kind of like a good idea for style transfer.
Yeah. It's, well, actually, whatever you can do with armor, you can apply sparsity, and it really depends on the task. But it could be interesting to see whether it would find something specific to that.
Okay. So right now I'm going to paste in the chat the link to the meeting room, so everyone can join, and we can just continue the discussions there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you again. So the link is in the chat. Feel free to join. Okay, while everybody joins, is this something you applied for your PhD? This sort of sparsity in the attention heads? You're muted.
Okay, so this work specifically is not something that I'm directly involved in, but it comes out of our research group. So I'm kind of only using some parts of it, but I'm not directly involved in exactly that paper that I presented. For example, I use sparsity for my model would improve, or as a benchmark or a baseline, but I'm not working on developing those functions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are a few people that joined. If any of you have any questions or comments, now's the...
Maybe I can add something about the idea of using translation to kind of change style. So you can look into this more like, okay, there's a lot of work on style transfer these days, and this is kind of typically used for tasks like I don't know, let's say you have a positive review for a restaurant and you want to turn this into a negative, right? Stuff like that, or or you have or you have just general text and you want to turn it into a poem. There has been work on that. Something that I have worked on together with colleagues. We have worked into. I mean, you can look into this more like as a text summarization task. I mean, text summarization typically, I mean, there's some typically don't really change the style, just make it shorter, no? But we have worked into transforming a research article into a popular summary, something that you can actually publish in a newspaper, right? So you can imagine how technical a research article, even I don't know, it can be in chemistry, can be in astronomy, can be in biology, can be in computer science, right? Anything. You just take it and you generate something like researchers have found a new, I don't know, a new material that can be used for blah blah blah, right? I mean, kind of it generates things like that using data from yeah, I mean from a website. It actually does those kinds of summaries.
Okay, and you suggest what? That
I don't really
probably if we
suggest
use.
anything. I just say that this task is kind of, I mean,
Okay.
can be. I mean, we have solved something similar using more like summarization. I don't know if. Do you think? I mean, have you tried something like this for text summarization tasks? Do you think that there's anything related to sparseness that has to be encouraged there? It's actually the same language. Do you see any benefits there? It's clear that you have two languages you want, mostly one word to map to one word, except in some exceptions. But do you think that you want something like that in summarization?
Well, it sounds that it would make a lot of sense for summarization because that's what we want to achieve at the end. But well, I haven't tried it, but it's interesting. There's an idea. I had a question about Preslav's talk. I don't know if I can ask. For example, did you mention that you have 10 languages or just the two of them? There were some numbers that you said. So my idea is, is this is your project easily applicable, for example, for news sources for Bulgarian? Because that would be very cool to have it. But I guess that's a lot of work to do something like that.
So we have done some experiments for Bulgarian. We have some publications on that at RNLP last year. We have been using data from Made in Oko, like Krasimir Gajoko. He has a few hundred websites and web pages characterized according to similar aspects. Are they spreading propaganda or fake news or clickbait and stuff like that? That's one thing. Another thing that we have done is we have been using machine translation, or we have been using cross-language representations. I don't know, they're like different transformers that are cross-language. I mean, we have been using BERT at the time, but these days there's XLM, and they're kind of better ones to try. So basically, we have tried this. The problem was the data for other languages, because you mostly have data for English. If you look into media bias fact check about the factuality of different sources, they have kind of very few examples for other languages, so it's kind of hard to evaluate, right? Kind of the ground truth. And we have done this like for left, center, right bias, and the problem was that left, center, right are the wrong thing. So actually, for left, center, right, we took it from other sources, because you can find, I don't know, I mean, it's hard to find whether you can trust this specific newspaper in this country, but it's easier to find whether you can trust this specific newspaper, whether this specific newspaper is left, center, or right. I don't know, you can go read in Wikipedia or somewhere. This kind of much easier to find. Whether you can trust it or not, that's much harder, right? And we have tried to predict left, center, right. Here's what happened. It kind of worked, and whether you use cross-language embeddings or representations or use translations, about the same, but still kind of the drop is quite significant. I can even like dig number shows graphs, but I'm not going to do this now. The problem is that left and right are not universal notions. So for example, if you look in Eastern Europe, where Bulgaria is, over there, what is left and what is right does not exactly map to what is left and right in the West. So because in Eastern Europe, the left is conservative, okay, but on the other hand, it's still kind of left in some certain economic aspects, but kind of social, it's kind of, more like right. And it's kind of, a mixture. In some countries, there is not real left and right. And then even left and right, which kind of aligns, let's say, to the US, I don't know, maybe UK, maybe France, and so on. The problem is that the topics that are being discussed are quite different. So, for example, in the US, they discuss a lot about gun control, but it's not an issue in Europe, right? So kind of, you train a model on something and you try to transfer it, and then you kind of go into, it's not just the language, right? That's the problem. is the topic and even kind of the nature of the labels, right? This is for right, center, left. I mean, for factuality, I really, really want to do a cross-language model. The problem is, how do I evaluate it? I don't have ground truth for anything but English. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay.
Okay, comments from someone else? There was one comment that we didn't answer for Tsetmio's talk, which was, could you share material about the problems with attention for neural network explainability to me? Because I raised this issue. Yes, I'll try to find it and I'll share it later on. Okay. Well, there aren't, it seems, a lot of questions left for discussions. But I'd like to thank you again for joining us, for giving these talks. It's been a great event for me.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. Yeah, I can say, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I kind of somehow miss the interaction with the public, right? I mean, I like to ask questions. I want to see, how they react, and I mean, in those kind of events, I enjoy talking to people afterwards, but yeah, let's see.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, unfortunately, maybe in a few months we'll go back to normal meetups where this interaction is kind of easier.
Yeah, one idea, probably we can post somewhere some links that Prasad was showing. Because I put a note for this. I don't know. I don't remember anymore what links I meant, but yeah.
Yeah, if you share them with me, I'll upload them to the Meetup and the Facebook page, and I'll share them with everybody.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Then thank you guys, and
thank
see you
you.
soon.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.